While most horror movies dabble with their fair share of death, it's also a reasonable expectation that filmmakers will try and make you root for at least a character or two, right? But not all horror films have the same goals or quality of execution. Rather, you might come away from it wishing that every single character just got what was coming to them. I'm Sean Ferry for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror movies where you wanted everyone to die. Number 10. Unfriended. Screen Life horror Unfriended pulls off the rather hilarious achievement of making its vengeful, murderous ghost the only particularly sympathetic character. After all, the film is centered around a group of unpleasant, distrustful, drama magnet teenagers who are being preyed upon because one of them recorded a video of a classmate, Laura Barnes, soiling herself while drunk, leading to her killing herself. Even as Laura's ghost enacts grisly vengeance on the group one by one, the victims are so deeply annoying and difficult to withstand for its scant 83-minute runtime that it's basically impossible to feel bad for any of them. Though protagonist Blair initially appears to be one of the more palatable characters, the twist ending, revealing that she was the one who recorded the embarrassing video of Laura all along, in turn accidentally teeing up her death, makes any remaining sympathy for her instantly evaporate. With Laura fully completing her supernatural revenge scheme at the film's end, it certainly felt like nothing of human value was lost. Number 9. Truth or Dare. Though Truth or Dare received many comparisons to Final Destination upon release in 2018, the big difference, apart from this film's lack of an R rating, is that Final Destination offered up a likeable and entertaining cast of characters who we mostly wanted to see survive. That's certainly not the case here, with Truth or Dare's collective of vapid college students simply being personality-devoid meat puppets who are all too ripe to fall prey to the central curse. Even the best characters here are bland cardboard cutouts, while Olivia's best pal Marky is an emotionally temperamental idiot, and Olivia ultimately shows herself to be unforgivably selfish, given that she eventually makes the curse go viral in a desperate attempt to spare her own life. Considering that this is a shockingly humorless film that doesn't have much fun with the ridiculous deaths of its awful characters, it feels like the filmmakers didn't actually want us to root for the curse to win. Oops. Number 8. The Devil's Rejects. Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses introduced audiences to the Fireflies, a family of vicious serial killers who lived to fight another day and return in the sequel, The Devil's Rejects. The 3 focal members of the family, Captain Spaulding, Otis, and Baby, are depicted in a slightly more flattering light this time around, with Zombie making a concerted effort to humanize them despite their vile penchant for torture and murder. Make no mistake, they're horrible people. And yet, the cop tasked with taking them down, Sheriff Weidel, also ends up becoming a violent maniac in his desperate quest to avenge everyone the Firefly family has killed. Ultimately, The Devil's Rejects is a movie entirely devoid of heroes, leaving behind only different flavors of scumbag, none of whose deaths we're likely to much lament, no matter how much Lynyrd Skynyrd Rob Zombie pumps through the sound mix. Number 7. Harpoon. Canadian horror comedy Harpoon does a fantastic job of making the audience hate all 3 of its doomed central characters by the end. Though Sasha is surely the least awful of the trio, she's not that far behind the duplicitous Jonah and aggressive Richard. As the trio end up stranded on a yacht in the middle of the ocean, they continually get at one another's throats, as disturbing past events come to light and each comes to realize how horribly manipulative, cruel, and basically despicable the others really are. By film's end, when Jonah and Richard are brutally killed and it's implied that Sasha isn't long for this world either, not a scrap of sympathy will be spared by the audience. It helps, of course, that Rob Grant's film is very obviously a black comedy, where the audience is encouraged to loathe these people and await their inevitably nasty ends. Number 6. The Green Inferno. Eli Roth clearly relishes making horror movies with a roster of characters you'll love to hate, and The Green Inferno is no exception. This ferocious homage to cannibal holocaust follows a group of young activists who travel into the Amazon rainforest to stop a petroleum company from displacing native tribes. The fact that the tribes don't take kindly to their presence clearly invites the audience to find a perverse sense of schadenfreude in the group's failed slacktivism, and especially the grisly fates that await the rather irritating group of ill-intentioned do-gooders. It's fair to say that protagonist Justine is assuredly the most affable of the bunch, but even she's a tricky character to fully warm to given her overwhelming naivety and some of her more questionable decision making. When characters on either side of the conflict end up dead, there's nothing to feel bad about here, even though Justine survives. Is there really anything to celebrate? Number 5. Dashcam. There's perhaps no recent horror movie protagonist more famously grating than Dashcam's Annie, a loud, unrelentingly obnoxious young woman who also happens to be a live streamer and conspiracy theorist and adheres to every detestable stereotype of that description one could possibly imagine. This, in a wider sense, the film's ultimate provocation to test whether the audience can actually root for someone so easy to hate, especially given her proud ownership of a MAGA hat and dismissive views of the COVID-19 pandemic. Ultimately, no, it's near impossible to care about Annie's survival, and while the film's few supporting characters are decidedly easier to tolerate by comparison, they're also tough to like because they tolerate way too much of Annie's nonsense without full-throated pushback. The irony, however, is that Annie actually ends up surviving to the end of the movie, and if you listen closely, you can probably hear director Rob Savage cackling at how much this pissed everyone off. Number 4. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. For those who complained that Bodies, Bodies, Bodies had a desperate shortage of sympathetic or even basically likeable characters, that was precisely the point. This delicious satire of Gen Z narcissism is entirely about a group of insufferably self-involved young people whose knee-jerk paranoia causes them to begin killing one another after one of their number turns up dead. Even the less obnoxious characters have deep personality flaws, which begin to make it tough to root enthusiastically for their ongoing survival, and ultimately, it's just a ton of fun to see their tenuous friendships quickly dissolve amid bloodshed. Greg is probably the most innocent party here, though it's certainly easy to give him the side eye given that he's hanging out with a group of people almost 2 decades his junior, one of whom he's dating. Not a murder-worthy offence by any means, but sus to an extent. All the same, it's tough to feel bad for anyone who dies in this movie, as that's the filmmaking working precisely as intended. Number 3. Hostel. Eli Roth strikes again, this time with Hostel, which is immediately on some iffy footing with its 3 central characters, given that Paxton, Josh, and Oli are a trio of sex tourists, frat bros, with a tendency for casual homophobia. Even accepting that in Josh's case he's implied to be a closeted gay man, the whole situation is a rough look for the 3 of them. Worthy of being trafficked and killed? Probably not, but Roth never quite works hard enough to make the audience actively cheer for their survival. On the other hand, the villains are admittedly infinitely more detestable, and it's undeniably satisfying to see them get dismantled by Paxton at film's end, even if his redemption arc isn't fully convincing. Anyone who still found Paxton unlikable by the film's end, however, only had to watch a few minutes of Hostel Part 2 to see him dispatched in a supremely brutal fashion. Number 2. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. 2022's mostly wretched Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel certainly does a bang-up job of making the audience simply root for nothing but the brutal death of everyone who appears on screen. Even with protagonist Lila being the traumatized survivor of a school shooting, it's still tough to root for her because she's so flagrantly uninteresting, and her backstory feels so woefully tacked on. Elsewhere, the young protagonist demonstrates so little basic survival instinct that there's nothing to do here but cheer for Leatherface every time he corners one of them. And it would be remiss to ignore the infamous sequence where Leatherface climbs aboard a bus, only for most of those on board to start filming him with their phones before one hilariously warns him, "Try anything and you're cancelled, bro." Naturally, it doesn't go well for them. Hell, even bringing back original franchise heroine Sally Hardesty can't engender much survivor support, given that she ends up feeling like a discount Laurie Strode who doesn't even take the perfect opportunity to kill Leatherface when she has it. When she died, not a care was had. Number 1. Bride of Chucky. And finally, Bride of Chucky is another classic horror film where just about everybody is worthy of death. As much as we love Chucky and his new bride Tiffany, we're certainly excited to see how they're going to die by film's end. Yet, unlike most other entries in the series, pretty much every human here sucks. Central couple Jade and Jesse are assuredly the dullest, least interesting, and most irritating human leads of any Child's Play film to date. As for the rest of the cast, they're largely idiots who have no sense of self-preservation even when they're occasionally not awful people. And then there's legitimately reprehensible folk like the corrupt police chief Warren Kincaid, with John Ritter playing so fantastically against type here. Chucky creator Don Mancini absolutely knows what he's doing here, letting us enjoy the campy carnage without needing to muster even a single care about all those hapless victims.